Before humanity ever rebuilt cities, it was commanded to rebuild values. Torah reminds us that after destruction, communities were warned not to repeat the arrogance that caused their fall. The rebuilding of nations was always tied to justice, restraint, and covenantal responsibility. The Bible echoes this truth when it speaks of rebuilding Jerusalem not merely with stones, but with righteousness, humility, and moral law. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that civilizations are not destroyed by weakness, but by moral collapse, and that true success belongs to those who establish justice, mercy, and accountability after hardship. Across all three revelations, one warning is clear: survival without morality is only delayed collapse. And this is where our story begins. Imagine a world after the fall. The old systems are gone. The flags no longer wave. The laws that once ruled millions lie buried beneath dust, fire, and silence. Survivors gather. Not because they trust each other, but because being alone is more dangerous than being together. This is not the end of humanity. This is the beginning of a test far more dangerous than destruction itself. Because history proves one brutal truth: rebuilding is harder than surviving. And most civilizations fail not during collapse, but during reconstruction. If you care about understanding how societies are reborn, or why they fail again, stay with us. This is not just history. This is a warning. Survivors, not citizens. The first survivors do not arrive with blueprints. They arrive with trauma. Some carry skills. Some carry weapons. Others carry memories of what went wrong. No one carries certainty. The earliest communities are fragile. Trust is rare. Authority is unclear. Fear governs decisions more than wisdom. And in this vacuum, the most dangerous question emerges. Do we rebuild based on what works, or what is right? History shows us that nearly every new settlement faces this fork in the road. Pragmatism whispers, do whatever keeps us alive. Morality insists, do what keeps us human. And the tension between these two forces shapes everything that follows. The first moral choice, the very first rule a new community creates, tells you how long it will last. Will leadership be based on strength, or character? Will justice be immediate, or fair? Will resources be hoarded, or shared? Will faith be remembered, or abandoned? In post-collapse settlements throughout history, we see the same pattern repeat. Communities that prioritize efficiency over ethics grow fast, but rot internally. Communities that prioritize principles grow slowly, but endure. This is not idealism. This is historical pattern recognition. Why survivors repeat old sins. Here is the uncomfortable truth no rebuilding society wants to hear. Survivors often recreate the very systems that destroyed them. Why? Because fear demands control, and control, without moral restraint, becomes oppression. When food is scarce, leaders justify hoarding. When threats rise, leaders justify brutality. When order weakens, leaders justify silencing dissent. Each decision feels necessary. Each compromise feels temporary, until it becomes permanent. The false promise of pragmatism. Pragmatism is seductive in broken worlds. It promises speed. It promises security. It promises survival. But pragmatism without moral limits always leads to one outcome: power without accountability. And power without accountability is not leadership. It is domination. Every fallen civilization believed it was making necessary choices. They were not evil. They were afraid. Ethical reconstruction. True rebuilding begins when a community decides that survival alone is not enough. Ethical reconstruction means placing boundaries on power even when chaos makes that difficult. It means choosing justice even when revenge feels justified. It means establishing governance not just to control behavior, but to shape character. This is where faith re-enters the story. Not as ritual, not as symbolism, but as a moral compass. One of the earliest examples of post-collapse rebuilding comes after the flood. Humanity survived total annihilation. Families regrouped. Land was fertile again. The opportunity to rebuild correctly had never been greater. And yet, instead of humility, the survivors chose ambition. The Tower of Babel was not just a construction project. It was a philosophical declaration. We will define ourselves. We will secure ourselves. We will rise without moral submission. The mistake was not architecture. The mistake was intention. The community rebuilt quickly, but without ethical restraint, spiritual accountability, or reverence. Unity existed, but morality did not guide it. And so the rebuilding failed, not because of weakness, but because arrogance returned faster than wisdom. Lesson: survival resets the world. Character decides what comes next. Prophetic communities built on moral law. Contrast that with communities guided by prophetic leadership. When Prophet Moses led a traumatized people out of collapse and slavery, the first priority was not cities, it was law. Not laws to dominate, but laws to restrain human excess. Rules about justice, limits on leadership, protection for the weak, accountability for power. Before stone structures rose, moral structure was established. Because the danger was never external enemies. The danger was what people would become when fear turned into authority. Why moral law comes first. Every successful rebuilding followed the same invisible blueprint. Moral boundaries before political authority. Accountability before expansion. Ethics before efficiency. When these steps were reversed, societies grew rapidly and collapsed violently. The Bible repeatedly shows this pattern with Israel. Whenever moral law was abandoned for political convenience, the society fractured internally before external enemies even arrived. The Quran reinforces this principle. Communities are not destroyed until injustice becomes normalized and accountability disappears. This is not coincidence. This is pattern. When leaders justify temporary injustice, one of the most dangerous lies in rebuilding societies is the phrase, "just for now." Temporary suspension of justice, temporary concentration of power, temporary silencing of opposition. History proves that nothing extends longer than temporary power. Leaders who rise during crisis often believe they are necessary. Some even believe they are righteous. But without moral governance, even good intentions rot. The survivors become subjects. The protectors become rulers. The rebuilders become tyrants. Social governance without spiritual anchors. Some communities attempt rebuilding without faith, believing ethics alone are enough. They establish rules, councils, and systems, but no higher accountability. This creates a subtle danger. When morality is disconnected from something higher than human authority, it becomes flexible, negotiable, rewritable. What is right today can be changed tomorrow if survival demands it. Spiritual governance does not remove human error, but it limits justification. It reminds leaders they answer to something beyond votes, force, or popularity. The community that endured, throughout history, the longest-lasting rebuilt societies shared uncommon traits. Leaders were restrained by moral law. Justice applied even to authority. Wealth circulation was encouraged. Spiritual humility tempered power. The weak were protected, intentionally. These communities did not avoid hardship, but they avoided moral decay. They understood a truth most civilizations learn too late. A society does not collapse when it is attacked. It collapses when it justifies becoming what it once feared. If you're noticing how ancient these lessons are, and yet how modern they feel, thoughts because humanity never changes its mistakes, only its technology. Stay with us, because what comes next connects these patterns directly to the world rebuilding itself today. Rebuilding identity, not just infrastructure. After collapse, people do not just lose homes. They lose identity. Who are we now? What do we believe? What will we tolerate? The first generation rebuilds out of fear. The second rebuilds out of memory. The third rebuilds out of comfort. And it is usually the third generation that forgets why moral limits were necessary. The silent erosion. Moral decay does not announce itself. It begins quietly. Small exceptions, justified shortcuts, unequal enforcement, selective morality. By the time collapse returns, people are shocked, not because it was sudden, but because it was ignored. The ruins were rebuilt. The mistakes were recycled. Today's world believes it is rebuilding. After wars, pandemics, economic collapses, moral fractures, and institutional failures, societies speak of reset, reform, and reconstruction. But listen carefully. The language of morality is absent. The language of efficiency dominates. Speed over justice. Stability over truth. Control over conscience. This is not rebuilding. This is rearranging ruins. When progress replaces principle, modern communities rebuild technologically faster than any civilization in history. But moral reconstruction lags behind. Surveillance replaces trust. Compliance replaces character. Policies replace principles. The assumption is dangerous that systems can restrain human nature without ethical foundations. History disagrees. The prophetic warning revisited. All three revelations warned of this moment. The Torah cautions against kings who accumulate power without restraint. The Bible warns that societies gain the world and lose their soul. The Quran reminds that Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Rebuilding infrastructure without rebuilding morality is not progress. It is preparation for collapse. Why fear always wins without morality? Fear is the default emotion after collapse. Fear demands safety. Safety demands control. Control demands obedience. Without moral limits, fear becomes law. And when fear governs communities, injustice is justified in the name of survival. The forgotten role of spiritual governance. Spiritual governance does not mean theocracy. It means accountability beyond power. It reminds leaders they are temporary. It reminds societies they are answerable. It reminds individuals they are responsible. Without this, morality becomes opinion. And opinion bends to convenience. Every rebuilt community eventually faces the same moment. Will we protect principles when it costs us something? When justice threatens stability? When truth threatens power? When morality threatens profit? That moment decides everything. Final warning. Civilizations do not fall because they forget how to build. They fall because they forget why they should build ethically. The ruins we inherit are not accidents. They are lessons. And lessons ignored always return as consequences. If you believe rebuilding the world requires more than technology, more than power, more than speed, then this channel exists for you. Subscribe, stay engaged, and share this message, because moral rebuilding is not a historical discussion anymore. It's a countdown.